Okay, so I thought that I would create a little video lesson in case you wanted to finish up the information on the chapter, dealing with the three hormones that act and cause special reabsorption whenever your body's under certain conditions. Okay, so you have this on a slide on the back of your sheet that you drew the nephron on, or not that you drew, but that we were working on in class, where you were adding what moves in and out of the nephron and labeling the parts and putting where the different processes occur. Okay, so on the back of that there were 6 slides, and this should be probably the last slide of those 6 slides. And it indicates the 3 hormones that cause some special reabsorption at the last part of the nephron, so the distal tubule or distal convoluted tubule and the upper portion of the collecting duct. Okay, so the first one is called ADH for short, which stands for anti-diuretic hormone. A diuretic is something that um, basically causes you to have more watery substances leaving your body. Okay, so if you were to take a diuretic like coffee or um, alcohol, then they kind of they cause you to go to the bathroom more because they prevent this particular hormone from doing its job. So ADH is responsible for telling the cells of the distal tubule and the upper collecting duct to become more permeable to water. So they make certain pores that are needed for us to reabsorb more water. So if your body is dehydrated, or if you've been doing strenuous exercise or things where you're releasing a lot of fluid, or you haven't been taking in very much fluid, then this hormone is going to be released in order for you to reabsorb that last 15%. So up to the um, up to the loop of Henle, like by the end of the loop of Henle, you'll have reabsorbed about 85% of the water that was filtered out. But this hormone will be released in times when your body needs more water. Okay, if the fluid levels are low, then your brain is going to send a message through the release of this hormone in order for your kidney to reabsorb that last 15% or almost 15%. So your urine in the end is going to look really concentrated. Okay, the second hormone that we're going to talk about is aldosterone. And aldosterone's job is to help when blood pressure isn't high enough. Okay, so if your blood pressure is low, then there's a few events that are going to happen that end up causing the release of this particular hormone. Okay, aldosterone is released from the adrenal gland, and it is going to cause the cells of the distal tubule to reabsorb sodium. And we've seen before that if sodium moves across the membrane, then water is going to follow it. Okay, so the whole purpose is the sodium is going to go in, water is going to follow it, not to increase fluid levels because you don't have enough fluid in the body, but for the purpose of increasing the blood volume. Okay, so it's to get your blood pressure back up. So if you have more water in your blood, it causes more pressure or pushing against the blood vessel walls, which increases your blood pressure. It's really important that your blood pressure is at an optimal level, because if it's not, then your kidneys aren't going to do the job where they filter the blood as well, right? Okay, because you need to have a certain pressure in that glomerulus in order to force the bad stuff out. If your blood pressure isn't high enough, then it's not a good thing for you. Parathyroid hormone is the other hormone that we're going to mention. We're not going to look at it in as much detail right now, but we will talk about it when we talk about the endocrine system a little bit more. So PTH is short for parathyroid hormone. It's released by the parathyroid gland, and its job is to cause the cells of the distal tubule to reabsorb more calcium. So let's say you are pregnant and you're building a baby in your body. Okay, so that baby is going to need lots of calcium for their bones and for their teeth and for um, normal processes like for their nervous system to work and their muscles to work. They need it, but we also need it for our own bones and teeth, and also um, to make our muscles and nerves and things like that work. Okay, so calcium is super important. If you're not getting enough in your diet, or if there's other things like maybe you have a broken bone, or you're trying to feed a baby, or you're trying to build a baby, then those are other means of using up calcium, and so it would mean you need to get more into you. Okay, so parathyroid hormone is going to cause reabsorption of calcium when your body needs it. Okay, in that last section. So that's the special reabsorption. So now we're going to look at the schematic diagrams. Okay, so you have this handout, and on one side it talks about how the kidneys help to regulate fluid levels or maintain water balance in your body. Okay, so in certain circumstances, like if you're not taking in enough water, or if you're sick and you're vomiting a lot or have diarrhea a lot, and so you're losing a lot of fluids, or maybe you're exercising a lot, then what happens to the water levels in your body and in your blood? You're right, it's lower. Okay, now FP and OP. A lot of you don't know what that's about because you haven't taken grade 11 biology. So I'm going to show you right quick. Okay, now let's make sure you can see this. This is blown up bit of capillary. Okay, so the movement of things in and out of a capillary depends on two opposing pressures that are acting on the capillary wall. Okay, there's fluid pressure, which we often refer to as blood pressure. Okay, it's pressure caused by the fluid that's inside of your blood vessels pushing outward. Okay, the other pressure is called osmotic pressure. Now, if you remember from maybe Miss Ramsey's class or from mine last year if you had me, osmosis is the movement of water from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So when we say osmotic pressure, it's pressure due to water trying to push its way in or out. Okay, so when fluid pressure is higher than osmotic pressure, there's a net pressure out. So things will be forced out of the capillary. So at the arterial end, that's important for normal exchange because that's where we want to give the cells, push out oxygen and nutrients to give the cells. Okay, but at the other end, at the right side of the diagram, you can see that the arrow for osmotic pressure is bigger than the arrow for fluid pressure. So since the osmotic pressure is bigger, there's a net pressure pushing inwards. Okay, so at that end, that's where we would pick up materials would move in to the vessel and be carried away. So that's where we'd pick up the wastes. Okay, so CO2 and cellular wastes would be picked up and then carried to sites of excretion or back to the lungs so that we could pick up oxygen. Okay, so fluid pressure is pressure pushing outward. Okay, so if there's lots of water and lots of things inside of the capillary, then that pressure is going to be high and pushing outward. But if there's not a lot of water, there's still stuff in there but not a lot of water, then the fluid pressure is going to be smaller and material is going to be moving inwards. So we'll go back to this diagram. Okay, so we said that water in the body and the blood are lower than normal. So if water in the blood is low, then fluid pressure is going to be less than osmotic pressure. Okay? If the fluid pressure is less, then water is going to move from the tissues into the blood, because we always need to have a certain amount of water in your blood in order to make it move around. Okay, so in order to allow things movement, then we have to pull as much water out of the tissues, wherever we can get it, to let that blood flow, because the blood's carrying oxygen and it's got to deliver it to your tissues so that their tissues will live. Okay, so blood's got to move. So the water's going to move from the tissues into the blood, and because it moves out of the tissues are they gonna shrink or are they gonna swell? If the water moves out of them, you're right, the tissues are gonna shrink. The hypothalamus is a special type of tissue. It's actually part of the brain. And so just like the other tissues, the hypothalamus is going to shrink. And within the hypothalamus, they have special receptors called osmoreceptors, which are going to be triggered, stimulated, because they've shrunk. Okay, and that is going to cause some responses in your body. Behaviorally, when your fluid levels are low, how are you going to feel? Right? You're going to feel thirsty. Okay, so then you're going to get some water. You're going to drink some fluid. If you drink some fluid, then that should increase the water that's in your body and your blood, because we're going to absorb it. Okay, take it in through our digestive tract. We're going to absorb it. It's going to be taken into your blood and then delivered to your body tissues. So, okay, let's see. Fluid pressure in the blood is then going to be higher, right? You have lots of water there. So it's going to be higher than osmotic pressure. So the water is going to move back from the blood into the tissues. So if it moves out into the tissues, then what's going to happen to the tissues? Are they going to shrink or are they going to swell? Right, they're going to swell back to normal at least. Okay, if all the tissues swell, then the hypothalamus is going to do that as well. Okay, so since it swells, the osmoreceptors will be turned off and you're going to feel satisfied. Very good. Okay, physiologically, okay, without us really thinking about it, the hypothalamus is going to send a message to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is located right attached to, there's a stalk that attaches it to the hypothalamus. Okay, so it sends a message to the pituitary gland and tells it to release ADH. That's the hormone we were talking about that causes cells of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, the upper collecting duct, to become permeable to water. Okay, so it goes to the kidneys, tells that region to become permeable to water. Oh, what's going to happen? We're going to have less water or more? Right. We're going to increase the water in the body and the blood because we're reabsorbing it from our nephrons. Okay, so instead of it going out in the urine, we're going to reabsorb that last 15%. So the rest is going to be exactly the same as what we said on the other side. Fluid pressure is now going to be higher than osmotic pressure. So blood is going to move, or water is going to move then from the blood out into the tissues. It's carried by the blood out to the tissues. Okay, tissues are going to swell back to normal. And so will the hypothalamus, turning off those earlier steps. Okay, so ADH is really important for regulation of body fluids. When we take something like a diuretic medication, or if we drink a lot of coffee, or if we drink alcohol, then that interferes with ADH, and it causes that last bit of water to be going out in your urine, so you pee more often. Okay, if you pee more often, you're going to feel dehydrated. So one of the biggest causes, one of the main reasons why people get a headache because they've had some alcohol, okay, that what they call a hangover feeling, is because their body is so dehydrated and their brain is hurting because it doesn't have enough fluid. Okay, you've peed out all that extra water and you're dehydrated. So it's really important to make sure you get enough fluid. All right. So now we're going to learn about how the kidney helps to regulate blood pressure. So, oh, that's my kids. They were getting along okay so far. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so to understand how your kidney helps to regulate blood pressure, we need to know what these parts are. Now, most of these you already know, okay? And you have this diagram on a sheet that you labeled diagrams before. You can take it out and label them, okay? So here's the glomerulus. I'm hoping you can see my cursor. Maybe I should get a pen. Get a pen. Okay, so here's the glomerulus. Now you can see. And surrounding the glomerulus is Bowman's capsule. Right? So here's Bowman's capsule. Okay, Bowman's capsule is going to catch the filtrate, whatever is being pushed out or forced out of the glomerulus. There's a space in here, so they call it the capsular space. I'm not too concerned that you know that term, but it's not very hard. And then this right here is just showing that the filtrate would travel this way into the proximal tubule. So this is part of the proximal tubule. Now, the arrows are indicating the direction of blood flow. So this, because the arrows are telling us, this would be the afferent arteriole, carries it into the glomerulus, and this would be the efferent arteriole. So the only new thing really here is this part, okay? The juxtaglomerular apparatus. So there's a little region right here where there's kind of a cluster of cells called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Juxta means kind of situated beside. Juxtaposed means situated beside or side of, to the side of. Glomerular refers to the glomerulus. So it's an apparatus that's situated beside the afferent arteriole. It's actually kind of embedded in it. Its job is to detect pressure. Okay, so we need to make sure there's a certain amount of pressure in the glomerulus. If it's not high enough, it's not going to be able to do its job and filter. Okay, so here we go. When your blood pressure is low, okay, it is detected by that juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay, the juxtaglomerular apparatus is going to release a certain enzyme called renin. Renin's job is to convert this protein. This is a protein that's floating around in the blood. Okay, it's inactive, and the reason we can tell it's inactive in that form is, let me get a pen, this part of the word, okay, inogen. The ogen at the end is an ending that kind of lets you know that it's an inactive form. So when the enzyme acts on it, oops, it converts it to the active form, which would be angiotensin. Okay, so if we break the word apart, angio refers to vessel, and tensin, think tension, pressure. Okay, now angiotensin is going to cause two things to happen. One thing is it's going to change the opening, the width of the blood vessels. So if we're responding to a decrease in blood pressure, the whole point of what's happening is to try and get it back up. So we want to try and increase the blood pressure. Should the vessel get more narrow or should it get more open? Right. Okay, it should get more narrow because then it makes it harder for the blood to get through, so that makes the pressure higher. Okay, we need to get that blood pressure back up. So we have two choices. There's vasoconstriction or vasodilation. Vaso means the vessel, a different way, and constriction means to make smaller. Dilation means to make it more wider or open it up. Okay, so we said it needs to cause it to get narrower. So we say it causes vasoconstriction, which will narrow or widen. Right, narrows the blood vessels, so it increases the blood pressure again. Okay. It also causes release of aldosterone. That's the one we were talking about that's involved in blood pressure. Okay. The aldosterone is released from the adrenal gland, which sits on the kidney. Aldosterone is another hormone, and it causes sodium to be reabsorbed from the distal convoluted tubule, mainly, and sometimes a bit in the upper collecting duct. If you remember, water tends to like to follow it. So water is going to follow the sodium ions into the blood. Because the water follows, the whole purpose is to increase the blood volume so that it increases. If there's more volume there, if there's more of it there, then it's obviously going to be pushing more on the sides of the vessel. So it increases the blood pressure. Okay, so I know that might seem a lot right now to take in, but this is here for you if you want to watch it again, watch things over again, and there's some links on the blog that have little video clips or animations that might help. Okay, ask questions if you have any.